Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a sweet and totally swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in. The entire glass tower of Hale residence in the heart of New York City seemed to sink into silence as the clock neared midnight. On the top floor, the 25th, the vast penthouse of Adrian Cole was still lit. He sat motionless in front of his laptop screen, financial figures dancing as if to tear apart his already weary eyes. Adrian Cole, the name that the finance and tech industries spoke of with both admiration and caution. A startup genius who became a millionaire at 32, owner of the Cole tech empire. People usually saw him in newspapers with a cold expression, dressed in perfectly tailored suits, rarely ever spotted leaving the luxury of the 25th floor to live like an ordinary person below. Tonight, though rare, he intended to go down to the 24th floor, where Mason, his best friend from college, had just moved in. Mason had invited him for a few glasses of whiskey to discuss a new project. Adrian shut his laptop, grabbed his coat, picked up a bottle of imported liquor, and stepped into the elevator. His phone was still pressed to his ear, a call from the London office that left him distracted. "Yeah, just sign it. I'll review the contract tomorrow. Don't call again, I'm busy," he snapped quietly, his head spinning. The elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped out almost by habit, walking along the 24th floor hallway without checking the apartment number. Mason lived in 24B, but Adrian knocked on 24A. Hearing no response, he assumed Mason had already sent him the door code like always. The door was ajar, Sophie hadn't fully locked it, and Adrian pushed it open and walked in. Inside apartment 24A, Sophie Lane, an investigative journalist for the New York Herald, was curled up on the sofa, eyes glued to the TV. The crime thriller she was watching had just hit its climax. A burglar breaking into an apartment at night. Outside, the wind howled against the window, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. Then, click! The sound of the door lock turned. Sophie jolted, blood rushing to her face. The door slowly creaked open. A tall man stepped in, a bottle of liquor in hand, his shadow stretching long across the floor. Sophie's heart pounded wildly. The TV was still showing a victim being attacked. Her brain instantly labeled him thief, robber. Without thinking, Sophie dashed into the kitchen and snatched up the heavy cast iron skillet, her secret weapon, as she often joked with colleagues she'd use if she ever ran into trouble. "Stop right there," she shouted, her voice trembling but forced to sound firm. The man didn't seem to hear. He walked deeper inside, still talking on his phone as he loosened his tie. Sophie lost all reason. He was definitely about to attack her. She charged forward and swung the skillet. Whack! "Ah!" The stranger groaned, staggering, but Sophie didn't stop. In her panic, she struck two more crushing blows. Only when he collapsed flat on the floor, the liquor bottle shattering and the stench of whiskey filling the air, did she gasp for breath and fumble to switch on the lights. The room was flooded with brightness. Sophie froze. In front of her wasn't some nameless intruder, but a face she recognized from every business magazine. Adrian Cole, the reclusive neighbor from the 25th floor, the tech millionaire, the man the whole building only dared admire from afar. And now, he was sprawled at her feet, clutching a bleeding head. "Oh my God!" Sophie dropped the skillet, her face turning pale. "Mr. Cole?" Adrian groaned, trying to push himself up, his eyes dark as a storm. "You dared!" Panicking, Sophie scrambled for her phone. "I'll call an ambulance right now, I'm sorry. I thought—" He shoved her hand away, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Don't! But your head is bleeding! If you dare leak this to the press, I'll sue you to the end." The cold threat made Sophie's blood run cold. Her hand froze mid-air, her heart hammering out of control. What a cruel twist of fate, because the man she had just taken down was none other than the wealthiest, most powerful figure in the building. And perhaps, from tonight onward, her newest nightmare. The ding of the elevator echoed through the quiet night. Sophie helped Adrian out of her apartment, stammering apologies with every step. The man's face was still dark and grim, the makeshift bandage on his forehead already stained with red, making her heart clench with guilt. Luckily, the building's medical room still had a night shift nurse on duty. She quickly cleaned and bandaged Adrian's wound, watching the tech millionaire tilt his head and wince as the antiseptic stung the cut. Sophie felt like the worst criminal of the century. "All done. It's just a superficial gash, but it'll hurt for a few days," the nurse said respectfully once she recognized the patient. "You should rest and avoid strenuous activity." Adrian gave a slight nod, answering in that familiar, deep, hoarse voice. "Thank you." Then he turned to Sophie. Those cold gray eyes made her swallow hard. "Now, let's talk, Miss Lane." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of the cafe in the lobby. Sophie sat across from Adrian, her palms clasped tightly together. He wore a fresh shirt, his hair neatly combed, the only reminder of the cast-iron tragedy last night being the white bandage on his forehead. Before she could speak, Adrian said coolly, "I'm considering two options. One, I sue you for assault, or two, you compensate me in another way." Sophie choked. "Sue me? You say it like ordering takeout. I was just defending myself. I thought you were a burglar." "Defending yourself?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth curling in faint mockery. "You defended yourself with 3 consecutive skillet strikes? If I had been a burglar, I wouldn't have lived long enough to stand trial." "You didn't hear me shout. I warned you," Sophie shot back, cheeks burning with both shame and anger. Adrian calmly sipped his coffee. "I heard, but at that moment I was on a call with a partner in Europe. Apparently they weren't as important as your skillet, were they?" Sophie bit her lip. Inside she wanted to apologize, and also throw another skillet at him just to get even. But reason screamed at her. This man's a millionaire. If he actually sued, her career would be over. "Fine, so what do you want?" she asked, her voice a mix of challenge and defeat. Adrian set his cup down, eyes glinting with sly amusement. "I want you to compensate me. With money?" "I don't need money." The curt answer left Sophie speechless. Of course, the richest man in the building hardly lacked cash. "So what did he want?" Adrian continued slowly. "There are a few tasks I need done, but I don't have time for them. You'll do them instead. Consider it repayment." Sophie's eyes widened. "You mean I have to be your assistant?" "If that's what you want to call it, fine. But don't expect it to be easy." She gave a bitter laugh. "Great. An investigative journalist for the Herald was reduced to running errands for a tech millionaire. Sounds like a joke." "If you'd prefer, you can always experience what it feels like to face me in court," Adrian replied with a shrug, as if the matter were entirely up to him. Sophie ground her teeth. "You really are a tyrant, Mr. Cole." "Thank you. I hear that often." His calm reply made her want to slam the table and laugh at the same time. In the end, she agreed to the most ridiculous verbal contract of her life. That afternoon, Adrian brought Sophie up to his penthouse to assign tasks. When the door opened, she was stunned. The apartment stretched nearly the entire floor, with glass walls looking out over the glittering city, and the minimalist furniture so luxurious that it felt like stepping into a Hollywood film. "Don't gape like that, Ms. Lane," Adrian said, tossing his coat onto the sofa. "This isn't a museum." Sophie quickly shut her mouth, though she couldn't help muttering, "Could have fooled me." He ignored her and handed her a stack of papers. "This is the list of things I need you to handle this week." Sophie skimmed it and nearly dropped her jaw. "What is this? Attend meetings for you? Review contracts? Pick out a birthday gift for your mother?" "Exactly. I'm a journalist, not a personal assistant." Adrian sank into his armchair, as composed as if chairing a board meeting. "You're free to decline. In that case, I'll have my lawyer draft the lawsuit." Sophie took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. The memory of last night flashed back. Her, the skillet, and the man sprawled on the floor. She had no chance of winning if he took her to court. "Fine, but just for 1 week. After that, my debt is paid." Adrian looked her straight in the eye, his gaze gleaming like a wolf that had just cornered its prey. 1 week, I promise." At that moment, Sophie felt as though she had just signed a deal with the devil. That evening, back in her apartment, 24A, Sophie collapsed onto her sofa and buried her face in her hands. "Oh God, Sophie, You just agreed to be your neighbor's premium maid. Absolute peak stupidity. But when her eyes fell on the lingering whiskey stain on the floor from last night's shattered bottle, she couldn't help but laugh. The whole situation was absurd. A journalist who once dared face the mafia was now the reluctant errand girl of a millionaire. What she didn't know was that this ridiculous deal would lead to a series of chaotic, comical days, dragging her into a world she had only ever observed from the outside, with nothing but her pen. Ever since the compensation deal, Sophie had been forced to interact with Adrian Cole more often. That meant stepping into a world that had nothing to do with her, the 25th floor penthouse. Honestly, every time she walked in there, Sophie felt like she'd wandered onto another planet. The apartment was vast, bathed in soft light, with expensive yet minimalist furniture and walls lined with collectible art. For a reporter living off a modest salary, it was nothing short of a living museum. As repayment for the skillet incident, Sophie's tasks started out seemingly trivial: organizing files, sending emails, checking his schedule. She muttered under her breath, wondering why a busy tech millionaire would have an investigative journalist doing grunt work, but still gritted her teeth and did it, because if she didn't, that looming lawsuit was always hanging over her head. Yet working more closely with him, Sophie began to notice something strange. By day, Adrian was the model executive, attending meetings, meeting with shareholders, consulting with lawyers, and running his company with his trademark cold composure. But at night, he often disappeared. Living on the 24th floor, Sophie heard the elevator doors open at 2 or 3 in the morning more than once. When she peeked into the hallway, she caught glimpses of Adrian's tall figure in a black coat, striding quickly, with no chauffeur, no bodyguard. A millionaire sneaking out like that only means two things: women or something shady, Sophie whispered to herself, jotting it down in her little notebook. Her investigative instincts urged her to follow, but her compensation duties kept her too busy to act on the hunch. One afternoon, Adrian walked into the living room carrying a rather heavy cardboard box. "Ms. Lane, give me a hand," he said, setting it down, his voice as cold as ever. "What now, another impossible mission?" Sophie frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. She had just been sorting through a pile of contracts. "Keep this for me for a few days. I'm going on a business trip." "Keep it? You have an entire penthouse for storage," she said suspiciously. "I want it kept at your place," he replied curtly, offering no explanation. Sophie crossed her arms, eyeing the taped-up box. Curiosity gnawed at her. What could be inside? Classified documents? Laundered cash? Weapons? She swallowed and tried to sound casual. "I don't like holding on to things with no clear origin." Adrian's gaze was steady, cold. "Trust me, you won't get into trouble." The words sounded half reassuring, half like an order. Reluctantly, Sophie nodded. That night, the cardboard box sat in the middle of her small apartment. Sophie sat on the sofa, eyes locked on it, her imagination running wild. Could she be harboring criminal evidence? Contraband? "Number I have to check," she muttered. She grabbed scissors and carefully cut through the tape. The lid flipped open, and what she saw left her stunned. Not cash, not weapons, not secret documents, but children's books, dozens of them, colorful, with pictures of princesses, superheroes, animals. Mixed in were small teddy bears, Lego sets, and brightly colored plastic balls. Sophie collapsed onto the couch, mouth wide open. What the hell? She dug deeper. At the bottom were boxes of crayons, sketch pads, and little packs of candy, all brand new, unopened. A small slip of paper lay tucked inside. Donation for St. Mary's Community Center. Next week. Holding the note, Sophie felt her chest soften. The next day, when Adrian came back to pick up the box, Sophie couldn't help asking, "These things, what are they for?" Adrian hesitated for a moment. His eyes softened briefly, then returned to their usual coldness. "I just want to give them away." "To kids?" "Yes," he answered shortly, then turned away, as if unwilling to elaborate. Sophie watched him go, her heart stirring. The image of the cold, playboy millionaire she'd always imagined began to crack. Behind that detached exterior, Maybe there was more than anyone knew. That night, Sophie tossed and turned in bed. She remembered the times Adrian slipped out into the night. Could it be he was delivering donations? Visiting community centers? She let out a bitter laugh. An experienced investigative journalist, and yet she jumped to conclusions about her neighbor being shady, just because of his odd habits. Sophie opened her notebook, crossed out the line "women" or "shady business," and wrote a new one. Maybe kinder than I thought. And for the first time since the skillet incident, Sophie felt a different kind of curiosity taking root. A curiosity to truly discover who Adrian Cole was. Friday afternoon, Sophie was struggling to finish a draft article on a corruption case when her phone buzzed. The caller ID was familiar. Adrian Cole. "Are you free tonight?" His voice came through deep, clipped, commanding. Sophie frowned. "Sorry, Mr. Cole, I've got something very important to do. Wash my hair." "Cancel it, I need you." "You think I'm your personal assistant?" "Compensation deal," Adrian replied flatly and hung up. Sophie glared at her phone. The man was impossibly domineering, but curiosity got the better of her. What exactly did he need her for? That evening, Sophie stepped into the elevator, wearing the simplest navy blue dress she owned. She hadn't planned on dressing up, assuming it was just another errand. But when the elevator doors opened on the 25th floor, she froze. The penthouse rooftop had been transformed into a dazzling ballroom. Crystal chandeliers shimmered with warm light. A piano played softly. Dozens of guests in tuxedos and gowns mingled, chatting over champagne. It was a full-scale charity gala. Sophie spun on her heel, ready to leave, but Adrian appeared in a sleek black tux, approaching with composed elegance. His eyes swept over her from head to toe, and a flicker of approval crossed his face. "Good. At least you're not in jeans and a t-shirt." "You set me up," Sophie hissed through clenched teeth. "I only said I needed you. Never specified for what." He gave a small shrug, the corner of his mouth curling. "So what am I supposed to do?" Adrian handed her a staff badge. Exclusive media, Sophie Lane. "Simple. You're a journalist. Tonight you're covering the event. Photos, notes, write-up." "I never signed up to be your in-house reporter." "I don't trust outsiders," Adrian cut in. "But you, at least I know." Sophie opened her mouth to argue, but that cold, unwavering gaze stopped her. She sighed, snatched the badge. "Fine, but only tonight." The gala unfolded in polished splendor. Top executives, politicians, and celebrities made their entrances. Sophie circled with a camera, capturing moments, muttering curses under her breath at the job she'd been strong-armed into. When the MC invited Adrian to the stage, the entire hall fell silent. He stepped up under the spotlight, his face calm, commanding. "Thank you for joining us tonight in support of children in need. Every contribution this evening will go directly to the Community Education Fund." His voice was steady, rich, resonant. Applause thundered. Black platinum credit cards flashed. The donation board lit up. $10,000, $20,000, $100,000. From her corner, Sophie scribbled notes, her eyes widening. It was the first time she'd seen the ultra-wealthy burn money so elegantly. When the auction began, Sophie was even more stunned. An abstract scribble sold for $200,000. A rare vintage wine, $150,000. The energy of the room soared. Then the MC's announcement cut through the buzz. "A donor who wishes to remain anonymous has pledged $2 million to the fund." Gasps rippled through the hall. $2 million, everyone murmured in awe. Sophie's eyes went wide, her heartbeat quickening. Who could give that much so quietly? She scanned the crowd. Most guests whispered and speculated, but no one claimed it. Her instincts drew her gaze toward Adrian. He sat calmly, eyes on his glass of wine, lips tilted in a faint, unreadable smile. It's him! The thought thundered in her mind. Adrian, the cold, calculating millionaire rumored to be selfish, greedy, obsessed with profit, was the one secretly donating $2 million without a word of recognition? Sophie's chest tightened with conflicting emotions. She had once suspected him of shady dealings, yet here he was, silent in his generosity. After the gala, when most guests had departed, Sophie found Adrian alone on the rooftop balcony. The city glittered below, like a sea of stars. "Why didn't you claim it?" Sophie asked softly. He raised an eyebrow. "Claim what?" "The 2 million. That was you, wasn't it?" He was silent for a few seconds, then turned away. "Don't pry, Lane. Just do your job." "But you could have been honored, celebrated." Adrian let out a short, sardonic laugh. "Fame doesn't buy truth. Children need schools, not the name of who paid for them." Sophie's words stuck in her throat. The night wind swept her hair, carrying a salty edge. The arrogant neighbor she had once despised was gone. In his place stood a man with a depth she hadn't imagined. Back in her apartment on the 24th floor, Sophie sat at her desk, laptop open to a blank page, but her hands hovered, uncertain. Typing Adrian Cole, the cold millionaire, suddenly felt shallow. She remembered his words. Children need schools, not the name of who paid for them. A simple sentence, but it shattered her preconceptions. Her fingers typed almost against her will. Behind Adrian Cole's icy exterior, perhaps there lies a heart far greater than people realize. She stopped, laughing bitterly. Since when had she, the woman who once took him down with a skillet, started writing lines like this? Maybe, since tonight's unexpected invitation. That morning, the New York Herald newsroom buzzed with unusual energy. Under the fluorescent lights, keyboards clattered and phones rang nonstop. Sophie had just set her coffee down when the editor-in-chief, Mrs. Donovan, barked, "Lane, meeting room, now!" Sophie startled. Donovan usually only called names when there was something big. Her heartbeat quickened. Inside the meeting room, several colleagues were huddled over a thick file. On the projector screen, the Coltech logo glowed. Sophie froze. Coltech, Adrian's tech empire. Donovan scanned the room, her tone brisk and sharp. "We've received breaking news. The Treasury suspects Coltech of engaging in money laundering through the use of fake investment funds. We need an investigative reporter immediately." Every eye turned to Sophie. "Lane, you've got the advantage. You live in the same building as Adrian Cole. Easier access than anyone else." Sophie's blood rushed to her head. I'm not sure." "You're an investigative journalist. This is your chance to prove yourself. I want a preliminary draft in 1 week." Donovan cut her off, leaving no room for refusal. Sophie left the meeting, her mind in turmoil. Donovan's words rang like a sentence. Investigate Adrian? The man she'd just discovered had another side, quietly donating, hiding his generosity. She reminded herself, this is work. A journalist puts truth above all else. But the image of Adrian in his tuxedo at the charity gala resurfaced, his words echoing, "Children need schools, not the name of who paid for them." If the rumor was true, was it all just a facade? Sophie buried her face in her hands and sighed. That afternoon back at Hale Residence, Sophie noticed a group of unfamiliar men in suits near the lobby desk. They whispered among themselves, but their eyes kept flicking toward the penthouse elevator. A bad feeling churned in her gut. The elevator doors opened and Adrian stepped out. He was on the phone, his face tense. But when he spotted Sophie waiting, he paused briefly. "You're back?" His voice was softer than usual, no longer cold. Sophie gave a small nod, hiding her unease. "Yeah, you look busy." "Always," Adrian sighed, then glanced toward the men in suits. "Rumors travel faster than I expected." Sophie's stomach dropped. He knew, he wasn't avoiding it. You've heard?" she asked quietly. Adrian nodded. His gray eyes showed a flicker of fatigue. "They want to smear me, but rumors are always more tempting than the truth." Sophie gripped her bag tighter. The journalist in her wanted to demand, "Who? Why?" But as his reluctant neighbor, she held her tongue. That night, Sophie sat at her desk, laptop open. The Coltech file the newsroom had sent stared back at her. Suspicious cash flow from Asian subsidiaries, unclear financial reports, donation accounts overlap with unverified charities. On paper, everything pointed at Adrian. Sophie rested her chin on her hand, torn apart. She remembered the children's books, the teddy bears in the box he'd asked her to keep. She remembered his eyes when he spoke about giving quietly. Could those funds have been charity money, but misinterpreted as something dirty because of poor transparency? She typed the opening line of her draft. Coltech, a tech giant, now faces allegations of money laundering. CEO Adrian Cole remained silent to all inquiries. Her fingers froze. She couldn't keep writing. Her duty demanded she expose him, but her heart whispered the truth wasn't so simple. The next day, Sophie ran into Adrian in the lobby. He was straightening his tie, eyes sharp with focus, clearly on his way to a meeting. "Cole," she called softly. He stopped, raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Do you know what people are saying about you?" "I know." Adrian's reply was clipped as he turned to go. "If you don't explain yourself, they'll twist it however they want." He turned back, his gaze cutting like a blade. "Lane, in business, explanations are often worse than silence. You should understand that." Sophie fell silent, her chest tightening. "But I'm a journalist. I can't just look away." Adrian's eyes bored into hers, his voice dropping low. "Then write what you believe is right. But remember, truth isn't always on paper." The words haunted Sophie the entire day. That evening, an email pinged into her inbox. A reminder from Donovan. "Lane, I need the draft. Don't soften. Journalism needs truth, not emotion." Sophie snapped the laptop shut and leaned back in her chair. She felt split in two. On one side was her duty, her lifelong pursuit of truth. On the other, a fragile thread of trust in Adrian, the man she once dismissed as arrogant, but who now showed cracks that made her want to believe he wasn't guilty. The sky was a slate gray, the wind howling as though it would rip the glass from the skyscrapers. That night, the city was battered by the biggest storm in years. Lightning flashed endlessly, rain pounded down in torrents, and sirens wailed across the streets. Sophie clutched her thin coat as she stepped into the lobby of Hale Residence. She had just come back from an interview, soaked to the bone. The lobby lights flickered under the storm's force. On the other side, Adrian walked in too, his tailored suit drenched, hair disheveled, wet against his forehead. They crossed paths at the elevator. "You just got back too?" His deep, husky voice broke the silence. Sophie nodded, a little awkward. Ever since the money laundering rumor had broken out, there had been an uneasy gap between them. She had been tasked with investigating him, but her heart resisted the task. The elevator doors slid shut, and the cab began its ascent. But just as they passed between the 12th and 13th floors, a loud bang rattled the cabin violently. The lights went out. "Oh God!" Sophie cried, gripping the rail. The elevator jolted to a stop. Only the howl of the storm outside and her thundering heartbeat filled the darkness. Calmly, Adrian felt for the emergency button and pressed it repeatedly. A bell rang out, then silence. "The storm's knocked out the lines," he said evenly, as if this were routine. Sophie's voice trembled. "You mean we're trapped here?" "Exactly." The cramped, pitch-dark space pressed in on her. Sophie inhaled deeply, trying to stay composed. But fear surged. She hated the dark, hated confinement. "This is a nightmare," she muttered. Adrian caught the tension in her voice. Slowly he said, "Stay calm. No one dies in an elevator just because the power's out." "Easy for you to say. Have you ever been stuck in one during a storm?" He was quiet for a few seconds, then admitted flatly, "Number. But I know one thing. Panic helps nothing." Time crawled. Sophie slid down to the floor, leaning against the cold steel wall, her body trembling less when she sat. Adrian's steady breathing filled the darkness. After a long while, he spoke. "You're investigating me, aren't you?" Sophie froze. How do you know?" "I'm not an idiot, Lane. I've seen the way you look at me, the roundabout questions, the way you stumble every time Coltech comes up." Sophie bit her lip, words tangled in her throat. I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to write what people want to read, even if it isn't the truth." Adrian's voice was sharp, cutting. Sophie's head shot up. The dark didn't hide the fury in her voice. "Don't lump all journalists together. I believe in truth. I just don't know what the truth about you is." Silence filled the cabin. Only the pounding rain against the skyscraper windows outside remained. Finally, Adrian let out a long sigh. For the first time, Sophie heard exhaustion in his tone. I don't flaunt charity because I hate the spotlight. People always question motives. If I make it public, they'll say I'm polishing my image. If I stay quiet, they think I'm hiding something shady. He paused, his voice dropping lower and slower. When I was 12, my mother died from illness. The hospital refused to help her because she didn't have insurance. I watched her waste away in a hospital bed. Since then, I swore, if I ever had money, I'd help people like her. But I don't need anyone to know. I just want it done, not praised. Sophie's breath caught. In the dark, she could almost see the cold facade covering a wound carved deep. Softly, she whispered, You don't have to carry it all alone. Adrian gave a short, rough laugh. I'm used to it. Believe me, Lane, people only love the perfection they want to see. No one wants to look at the cracks. That's not true. Sophie shook her head, though he couldn't see. It's the cracks that make someone real. The silence stretched again. Sophie's heart clenched. She had never imagined sitting in the dark, in the middle of a storm, listening to Adrian Cole reveal such fragile pieces of himself. Almost an hour later, the backup system flickered on. Fluorescent light buzzed weakly into the cabin. Sophie blinked, her eyes landing on Adrian, slumped against the opposite wall, his suit soaked, hair in disarray. He no longer looked like the untouchable millionaire, just a man, worn down from carrying too much. The elevator jolted, then slowly crept upward. They didn't speak again, but something between them had shifted. When the doors slid open on the 24th floor, Sophie stepped out first. She glanced back and caught Adrian's gaze following her. And in those gray eyes, for the first time, she saw something truly genuine. Her heart skipped faster. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. That morning, the city woke to a single name plastered across every front page: Adrian Cole. Cole Tech involved in massive money laundering scandal? Tech millionaire and his web of shady charities? Adrian Cole, business genius or con artist? The screaming headlines sprawled across newspapers everywhere. From tiny corner cafes to the giant electronic billboards of Times Square, his name was on everyone's lips. Sophie sat frozen at her desk in the Herald newsroom. Her unfinished draft still glowed on her laptop when Donovan, the editor-in-chief, stormed in, slamming a thick file down. Lane, it's time. Where's your piece? Sophie startled. I'm still verifying. There are gaps. Things don't add up. Donovan crossed her arms, her eyes sharp as a blade. There's no time for that. News is a war of speed. Other outlets are already running it. If we don't publish something in-house, we fall behind. But what if it's not accurate? What if we destroy an innocent man? Sophie's voice cracked. Donovan's tone hardened. This is an order, Lane. You have the closest ties to Adrian Cole. You must be the one to publish. That article will skyrocket your career. Don't waste this chance. Sophie went still. Her pen, once meant to uncover truth, was now being forced into a dagger, to stab a man she didn't fully understand, but whom her heart urged her to believe in. Back in her apartment on the 24th floor, Sophie sat numbly before her laptop. The window was open, the storm's chill still lingering from the night before. She typed a few words. Cole Tech, a leading tech giant, faces money laundering allegations. Her fingers shook. Each word felt like a blade. She remembered the night in the elevator, the way Adrian's voice broke as he spoke of his mother, of his vow to help those in need. The children's toys are in the cardboard box, the anonymous $2 million donation. Could that man really be a criminal? Sophie sprang up, pacing the room. Donovan's command echoed in her ears. This is an order. But another voice drowned it out. Adrian's from the dark. Truth isn't always on paper. Before Sophie could decide, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Adrian standing there. White shirt, tie loosened, fatigue etched into his face. But in his gray eyes, anger burned, barely restrained. Are you satisfied now? His voice was low, icy. What do you mean? Sophie stammered. The papers this morning, the headlines everywhere. You're a journalist, living right below my penthouse. You think I wouldn't know who leaked the first draft? Sophie's blood ran cold. You think I leaked it? Adrian strode past her without waiting for an invitation, slamming the door behind him. I warned you from the beginning, stay out of it. But you chose to sell me out, for a story. No, I haven't written anything, Sophie burst out, tears brimming. I was pressured, but I haven't published a word. Then what about this? Adrian hurled a stack of Herald printouts onto her desk. I have friends there. They said you were the one assigned. Sophie stared at the papers, her heart twisting painfully. Someone inside the newsroom had leaked it, to frame her. I didn't betray you, her voice broke. Adrian let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. Don't act anymore, Lane. From the start, you didn't approach me because of that stupid skillet. You wanted an exclusive. I was just a golden source, wasn't I? No, Sophie shouted, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know you're not a bad man. Adrian froze. In her eyes, there was no deceit, only raw pain and desperation. But anger won. He stepped back, eyes shutting like iron gates. Believe me, Lane, this is the last time we'll ever speak like this. He turned and walked away, leaving Sophie crumbling to the floor, her heart shattering. The next day, Donovan called her directly. Lane, I need that article in 24 hours. Otherwise, you're out. Sophie clutched her head. Her career was shattered before her like glass. If she refused, she'd lose everything. If she obeyed, she'd betray herself and Adrian. She sat at her desk, staring at the blank page. Outside, rain began to patter against the glass again. What terrified Sophie most wasn't losing her job. It was the fear of losing the one chance to prove to Adrian that she had never wanted to hurt him. But would he ever believe her again? That night, Sophie stepped out onto her balcony, lifting her gaze to the 25th floor. The penthouse lights still glowed. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the glass, his back turned to the world. The distance between them was no longer just a single floor. It was a gulf of misunderstanding, swallowing everything whole. For 2 days straight, Sophie barely slept. Rumors about Adrian spread like wildfire, with the press milking every detail, even fabricating stories. But instead of publishing as Donovan had ordered, Sophie chose to do the opposite, investigate the truth herself. She dug back into financial records, chasing leads the newsroom had ignored. Late at night, she sat hunched over her laptop, dark circles under her eyes, fingers flying across the keys. Gradually, the data revealed an odd pattern. The supposedly suspicious transfers all funneled through the same intermediary, matching the saint. Mary's charity fund Adrian secretly supported. The money never circled back to Adrian's personal accounts, but disappeared into rural community projects. And most telling of all, a longtime rival company of Coltech appeared repeatedly in indirect transactions. Someone setting him up. Sophie clenched her pen. But investigating Adrian Cole wasn't safe. On the third night, as she left the Herald building, Sophie felt eyes on her. The sound of footsteps followed close behind. She quickened her pace. The stranger did too. Suddenly, a tall figure lunged, a rough hand clamping down on her shoulder. Come with me, reporter. Stick your nose too far, and you'll end up dead. His voice was gravelly, threatening. Sophie panicked, struggling against his grip, but his strength was overwhelming. She screamed, thrashing, her hand fumbling for the pepper spray in her bag. He yanked her purse away, dragging her toward a dark alley. Then, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the night. Let her go! Both turned. Adrian. He emerged from the shadows, no tailored suit this time, just rolled up sleeves, his gray eyes blazing with fury. Before the thug could react, Adrian charged, his fist connecting in a brutal punch. The man stumbled, cursed, and bolted into the darkness. Sophie collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath. Adrian dropped beside her, gripping her shoulders firmly. Are you hurt? She nodded quickly, tears brimming. I thought... Adrian pulled her up, his arms steady, protective. His voice was low, stern. Don't go out alone anymore. You're a target now. Back at Hale residence, Sophie still trembled as she spoke. You know, I found evidence. Someone's framing you. Those so-called laundered funds? They all went to the charity. I'm certain someone set you up. Adrian drove in silence, his face tight as steel. When the car rolled to a stop at the lobby, he finally said, I told you not to get involved. And now, you almost got yourself killed. But I can't just stand by while you're destroyed by lies. Sophie shot back, her voice shaking. I'm a journalist. My job is to find truth, not chase rumors. Adrian's eyes burned into hers, fierce and conflicted, as if he wanted to scold her and shield her at once. His breath came heavy. Then unexpectedly, he pulled her against him, arms locking her close. You're stubborn, Lane, he murmured, voice dropping low. But this time, I won't let anyone lay a hand on you again. In the elevator, the air thickened between them. Standing so close, their breaths mingled. Sophie's eyes fell on the fresh bruise darkening Adrian's cheek from the fight. You're hurt, she whispered, raising her hand to touch. Adrian gently caught her wrist, holding it still. It's nothing. I'm used to pain. Sophie shivered. In that moment, she realized he wasn't just the powerful, untouchable millionaire. He was the man who had stepped down from his high tower, risking himself without hesitation, to save her. When the elevator doors slid open on the 25th floor, Adrian didn't let her go back to her apartment. He kept her close, guiding her straight into the penthouse. The vast apartment glowed with light, but Sophie's chest was in chaos. Adrian poured her a glass of water, then faced her, gray eyes sharp with resolve. Listen, Lane, from now on you don't go anywhere alone. You'll stay here, under my protection. Here, in your penthouse. Sophie's eyes widened. Yes. His gaze never wavered. I don't care what you think, but I won't give anyone the chance to harm you again. Sophie stood stunned, her heart racing wildly. His words sounded like a command. Yet underneath, there was something deeper, almost like a promise. That night, sitting alone on the penthouse sofa, Sophie realized everything had spun beyond her control. She wasn't just an investigative reporter anymore. She was part of Adrian's war. And maybe deep inside, she couldn't deny it. The image of him fighting through the dark to protect her was carved into her heart, an imprint she would never forget. In the morning, Sophie sat at her desk piled high with papers, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. Adrian's voice from the dark alley last night still echoed in her mind. Let her go. He had shielded her instinctively, delivered a clean punch, then pulled her into his arms as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Taking a deep breath, Sophie opened her laptop and pulled up rows of spreadsheets. The funds labeled suspicious led back to names that made her throat tighten. The Bright Scholarship Fund, St. Mary's Community Center, the Lunch for Kids program. She called a friend in the auditing department and sent over the transaction codes. The results came back. Every so-called stain in the media had in fact turned into bricks for schools, hot meals for children. At noon, Sophie went to St. Mary's. The schoolyard was filled with laughter, some kids coloring, others using old tablets. On the cracked wall, a simple handmade sign read, "Thank you, anonymous friend." The center's manager explained, "They stay anonymous, only ask for detailed reports. The kids call him the man in black. I don't ask further. Everyone has their reasons." Sophie tightened her grip on the report copy. This scandal was a trap. Back at the penthouse, she set the stack of papers on the table. I just came from St. Mary's. Every transaction went into scholarships, lunches, and new roofs. Nexora Tech manipulated intermediaries to smear Coltech. This is a setup, Adrian. His name slipped out as naturally as a prayer. He looked at her for a long time. Swallowing hard, she asked, "Why, when everyone doubted you, didn't you make it public to clear your name?" Adrian walked to the glass wall, his voice low and steady. "Because the truth is still the truth, whether anyone sees it or not. Public opinion is like monsoon winds, loud, then gone. Children can't eat the wind. They need meals and notebooks. If I defended myself, the spotlight would fall on the projects. Others would rush in to claim credit, turn it into a show. I'd rather be doubted by the whole world than use their pain as a tool. Sophie's nose stung. The man in black, the kids had already known him in their own way, without a name. Aren't you afraid? Of course, he gave a tired, transparent smile. But the scariest thing isn't gossip. It's the moment I see a child lose a meal just because I wanted society's applause. His words left Sophie speechless. In the face of such quiet kindness, her own doubts suddenly felt deafening. I'm sorry, she blurted out, for the first time using the intimate pronoun. I doubted you. I thought you were hiding. I wasn't fair. Adrian shook his head slightly. We live in an age where people love stories more than the truth. You weren't wrong to question. The only mistake is when people stop searching after finding an easy version. The words you and I now felt like a fragile yet binding bridge. Sophie opened her laptop, the cursor blinking like an urge. She typed, "They say he laundered money." I traced it and found it turned into chalk in a teacher's hand, into bread in a boy's hand, into roofs that didn't leak. He never cut a ribbon, never stood before a camera. He chose to step back so the children could stand in the center. Adrian brought her tea. Write what you believe and be ready, because when the truth isn't the story people want to hear, they'll get angry. I know, but if I don't write it, I won't be myself anymore. He looked up, a small bird's shadow crossing the glass. Don't lose yourself. The rest, leave it to me. Sophie laughed through wet eyes. And what will you do? Punch every article? I've punched things bigger than the press, he half joked, half serious. But promise me one thing. Don't let them teach you to doubt your own heart. That sentence opened a door inside Sophie's chest. From the cast iron pan that first night, to the toy box, to the thank you anonymous friend card, everything had led her here. Trust was no longer just part of her job, but her humanity. As the afternoon faded, Sophie wrote nonstop. Adrian quietly set water and cookies beside her, just as he helped the children, right on time, without needing recognition. She typed the final line. The truth doesn't need spotlights only to not be hidden. Her fingers trembled. It's done, she whispered. Adrian stood across the table, the sunset casting gold over his shirt. He smiled faintly. Thank you, he said. For the article. For you. The evening wind sent a few notes fluttering. Sophie realized it wasn't just papers. She herself was being held steady by something both strong and gentle. Outside, the city lit up. Inside, another story was about to shine. Sophie saved the file, naming it simply, Money in the Right Place. She looked up. Adrian was still there, silent, asking for nothing, bearing every misunderstanding so that what needed protecting could keep on living. Sophie smiled, forgiving herself, and made a vow she didn't speak aloud. I will write, and I will stand beside you when the storm comes. She went back to her apartment to retrieve a few personal items. That night, the city had just lit up. Sophie sat alone in front of her screen, the article complete with its simple title, Money in the Right Place. The cursor hovered over the send button. She took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I'll publish it. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Miss Lane? The voice was rough like sandpaper. Stop. Don't send anything. Curiosity will get you to a place you'll never come home from. The blood drained from Sophie's face. She shut off the phone, locked the door, and double-checked every lock. The feeling of being watched pressed cold against the back of her neck. She hugged the printout to her chest and shoved it into her laptop bag. Give it to Adrian. He needs to know. That thought steadied her heartbeat, if only halfway. The 24th floor hallway was silent as a tomb. Sophie pressed the elevator button. The cabin was empty, steel walls reflecting a girl with trembling hands but blazing eyes. Just as the doors began to close, a shadow rushed forward, a rough hand blocking the gap. Where are you off to, little reporter? He sneered, the stench of cigarettes heavy. Let me escort you down to the basement. Sophie clutched her laptop bag tighter. Get away! She kicked straight at his shin and bolted. Footsteps thundered after her like war drums. She jabbed frantically at another elevator button. Before the doors could open, he yanked her sleeve. Hand over the file! I don't have anything, Sophie screamed, driving her knee upward. He doubled over for a moment, loosening his grip. Heavy, steady footsteps sounded from the opposite direction. "Sophie!" "Adrian." He appeared in just a thin sweater, not even a coat. No bodyguards, just him. Adrian pulled Sophie behind him, facing the attacker. "Get out! This building has cameras on every corner." "Cameras go blind sometimes," the man sneered, pulling a metal rod and lunging. Adrian shoved Sophie back into the elevator, his own body blocking the blow. The rod came down hard, a dull, sickening thud. Adrian grunted, one knee buckling. Sophie screamed, grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall, and smashed it against the man's shoulder. He staggered, then bolted for the stairwell. Sophie dropped the extinguisher and fell to her knees. "Adrian, can you hear me?" Sweat glistened on his temple as he clutched his side. "I'm fine," he tried to smile. "You were great. Fire extinguisher. Stronger than a frying pan." "You stubborn idiot!" Sophie's hands shook. "If anything happens to you, Her words broke apart. He was breathing hard, eyes half shut. Panic-stricken, she slammed the emergency button and called for help. By the time security arrived, Adrian could no longer stay upright. Cold white light, the sting of disinfectant like ice in the air. Sophie stood at the admissions desk, Adrian's blood staining her shirt. "Relationship to the patient?" the nurse asked. Sophie froze. "Neighbor? Reporter?" Each word felt too small. Her lips moved before she could think. "Girlfriend." The nurse's pen paused for a beat, then nodded. "Then sign here, emergency contact." Her signature shook but landed firm, like anchoring into a new shore. The emergency room doors swallowed Adrian whole. Time stretched into a fraying string about to snap. She paced the corridor, her heart leaping each time a white coat appeared. Over an hour later, the doctor emerged. He has soft tissue trauma, a fracture in his left rib, and a laceration that needs stitches. Not life-threatening, but we'll keep him overnight for observation. Sophie nodded, tears spilling hot and unstoppable. He was alive. That was enough. In the recovery room, Adrian lay still, his side wrapped in white bandages. His eyelids fluttered as she pulled a chair close. "You scared me half to death," she whispered. His eyes opened, blurry at first, then sharpened. Seeing her, he smiled, for the first time without walls, only warmth and quiet. "Girlfriend, huh?" he repeated, teasing softly. Sophie flushed crimson. "I slipped." "Slipped? But true. Sounds nice." She held his hand daringly. "I'm not taking it back, but if you ever risk your life like that again, I'll sue you for terrifying me." He chuckled weakly. "No more legal battles then. Now it's a matter of the heart." His arm was weak, but his fingers laced firmly through hers. A comfortable silence settled, like a thorn finally pulled free. "I'll send the article tomorrow," she murmured. "They'll dig, they'll smear." "I know, and I'll be here." "In the hospital?" "By your side, wherever that is." Sophie laughed through her tears. "Of course I'm scared, but I'm more scared of losing you." Adrian's gaze held hers. "I won't disappear, unless you push me away." "I already claimed you at the hospital desk. Too late to push." He closed his eyes, tilting his head toward her hand, still gripping hers as if she might vanish into smoke. The monitor beeped steadily. The air conditioner hummed. Suddenly, it all felt like a lullaby. Sophie opened her laptop, attached the article, and typed, "This is the truth I've verified. I take full responsibility for every word." She glanced at him. Adrian had drifted to sleep, a faint smile still on his lips. For the first time, her fear transformed into a stubborn calm because she wasn't alone anymore. She hit send. A soft whoosh echoed. The article left her hands, flying into the storm. She didn't know if it would be torn apart or find its way, but she knew a hand was holding hers. Leaning down, she whispered, "Sleep, you stubborn man. When the storm comes tomorrow, we'll share the same umbrella." Outside the glass, the night sky was ink black. Inside, Adrian Cole's first true smile, warm, no longer cold, unfolded. And Sophie realized, sometimes a slip of the tongue is actually a promise of fate. The article had been sent out that rainy night like an arrow loosed from its bow. Sophie knew there was no turning back. She only managed one last glance at Adrian, sleeping peacefully in the hospital, a faint smile still lingering at his lips, before closing her laptop and whispering a silent prayer. By morning, as the first light broke through the hospital window, Sophie's phone exploded with hundreds of notifications, messages from colleagues, friends, strangers. One colleague simply wrote, "Lane, your piece is trending at the top." She opened it. Her screen flooded with headlines. The truth about Coltech's finances, a silent journey of charity. Adrian Cole is no money launderer. He's the anonymous benefactor of thousands of children. On social media, her article spread like wildfire. Pictures of suburban schools, children with radiant smiles, simple school lunches, each image paired with excerpts from Sophie's story. People were beginning to talk differently. Could we have been wrong about him? I cried reading this. All these years, he did it alone in silence. Not every truth fits neatly in loud headlines. Sophie sat in silence, her heart trembling and burning at once. This was what she had dreamed of, her words being used to shine light, not to smear. That afternoon, Donovan called. Her voice, usually sharp and cold, carried an uncharacteristic tremor. "Lane, do you realize what you've just done?" "I do," Sophie answered firmly. "I wrote the truth." A long silence followed. Then Donovan exhaled. "Your article is spreading beyond anything we expected. At first I feared you had signed your own death warrant. But maybe I forgot that journalism isn't only about racing the clock. It also requires courage." For the first time, Sophie heard acknowledgement from the unyielding woman. The news spread beyond city borders. Television stations reached out, asking to interview her. Charities that had once received anonymous support began speaking up in unison. Suddenly, children holding signs that read, "Thank you, anonymous friend," were appearing across the internet. A wave of vindication. At the hospital, Adrian followed quietly. He reclined against the bed, the light reflecting in his gray eyes. Sophie walked in carrying a stack of printed newspapers. "People are starting to see now," she said, setting the papers on the bed. He glanced at them, caught the image of laughing children, then folded them shut without a word. "You're not happy?" Sophie asked, puzzled. "At least now they don't see you as a money launderer anymore." Adrian gave a faint half-smile. "I never needed their praise." "But you need to live in the truth," Sophie insisted, sitting at his side, her eyes bright. "You can't let yourself be buried by rumors. People deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to breathe as a human being." His gaze locked onto hers, so deep it pulled at her chest like a whirlpool. Finally, his voice dropped low. "If it weren't for you, I'd never have dared to live honestly." The words struck Sophie like a sudden blow, her heart swelling painfully. His admission sounded like both a confession and a surrender. Before she could respond, Adrian reached out and pulled her into his arms. His embrace was tight, warm, solid. So much so she felt as if every storm outside had been held at bay. For a few seconds, she sat frozen, then relaxed, resting her forehead against his shoulder. His heartbeat raced, impossible to hide. "Adrian," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Just let me hold you for a while," he said, hoarse and sincere. Sophie closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill. In his arms, she realized everything she had done, the sleepless nights, the danger, the internal battles, was worth it, if only to reach this moment, where Adrian finally admitted he wasn't alone anymore. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she whispered. "I only wrote what I saw." "No," Adrian shook his head, squeezing her hand. "You chose to believe. That's the extraordinary part." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, then his voice hardened, low and resolute. "I never planned to investigate. For me, whether the world believed or not didn't matter, as long as the children had their meals in schools. But when they came after you, that changed everything." Sophie's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I've had people digging into Nextra Tech. Every forged transaction, every bribe to the media, every piece of evidence that led to those attacks in the hallway last night. We have it." His eyes sharpened, cold steel beneath the warmth. "They thought they could scare you into silence, but I'll make sure they have nowhere left to run." Her fingers trembled as she gripped his hand. "You, Did all this just for me? No, Adrian said, voice steady, pressing her hand tighter. Because they dared to touch you. Once was already too much. At that moment, Sophie understood. Not only was her pen protecting him, but he was building an unshakable wall to protect her. And for the first time, she felt she wasn't fighting this war alone. That evening, Sophie sat by the hospital window, gazing out at the city lights. Adrian slept peacefully, his breath even and calm. She thought about her journey, from that first swing of the frying pan, through doubt, through endless turmoil, to this moment, when the truth had broken through, and Adrian's real self had finally been seen. She knew the storm of public opinion wasn't over. People would still doubt, still dig for dirt. But at least now, they had another story to believe. And for her, the most important part was this. The man beside her, for the first time, had smiled with genuine warmth and placed his trust in her. Near midnight, a message lit up her phone. Lane, your article has been nominated for this year's Journalism Award. Congratulations. Sophie set the phone down, turning toward Adrian. He still slept, his face calm in a rare serenity. She smiled softly and whispered, "The award doesn't matter. What matters is, you'll never have to be alone again." Outside the window, the rain had finally stopped. The city gleamed bright, as if it too were exhaling after a long storm. 2 months later, shocking news broke. Nexora Tech was indicted after the series of evidence Adrian had collected was handed over to the authorities. Bribes to the media, fake contracts, even the hallway camera footage from the night Sophie was attacked, all lined up into an undeniable chain. On television, the broadcast showed Nexora's CEO being escorted away. The anchor commented, "The smear campaign against Coltech has officially been exposed. Evidence shows that Nexora Tech not only manipulated public opinion, but also orchestrated an assault on a female journalist." Sophie sat quietly next to Adrian. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He simply gave her hand a gentle squeeze and murmured, "I never needed them to believe me, but I'll never allow anyone to hurt you." The fear that had haunted her, anonymous calls, shadows in the hallway, suddenly dissolved. Now the truth wasn't just shining across the headlines. The power lurking in the dark had finally paid the price. Sophie leaned against Adrian's shoulder, feeling the crushing weight in her chest finally lift. She knew the storm had passed and peace was truly beginning. 1 year later, the Riverside apartment complex still gleamed under the sunset, but for Adrian and Sophie, it was no longer the same place. The cold walls that once separated the 24th and 25th floors had become the home of charitable projects, sleepless nights writing together, and countless times they had appeared hand in hand before the press. The foundation they co-founded, Hope for Tomorrow, had just turned 1. That evening, after wrapping up a successful fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, Adrian came home late. He was tired, but peace filled his heart. Still, his absent-minded, head-in-the-clouds nature hadn't changed. He was on the phone, pressed the button for the 24th floor instead of the 25th, and found himself in front of a familiar wooden door. He slipped the key in, pushed it open, and walked straight in. Clang! The metallic sound made his heart skip a beat. In front of him stood Sophie Lane, in an apron holding her infamous frying pan. But instead of screaming and swinging it wildly like she had the first time, this time her lips curved with playful mischief. "Wrong door again, neighbor?" Sophie raised a brow. "Should I give you another scar to remember for life?" Adrian froze, then suddenly laughed. "I think that scar is enough to remind me every day that I found you." Sophie pretended to glare, then lowered the pan and leaned her hip against the counter. "All right, I'll let you off, but..." She paused, eyes twinkling with both playfulness and tenderness. "This time, you'll have to take responsibility for the rest of my life." The words were light, but in the stillness, they fell heavy as stone. Adrian stood rooted, staring at the woman before him, the one who had once floored him with a single pan strike, but who had also awakened the warmth he thought he had lost forever. He stepped closer and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. His hand trembled slightly, but his gaze was unwavering. "No need for forgiveness." Adrian's deep voice filled the little kitchen on the 24th floor. Because you are where I belong. He opened the box. The ring glittered, its light reflecting on Sophie's stunned face. Sophie Lane. Adrian dropped to one knee, locking eyes with her. Will you let me take responsibility for you forever? Not because of that pan strike, not because of duty, but because of that very moment. I knew I never wanted to live another day without you. Sophie covered her mouth, eyes burning. Her heart pounded wildly, caught between laughing and crying. You, her voice faltered, trembling. You know I can't stand those cheesy romance lines, right? Yeah, Adrian smirked, but you're still going to nod. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Sophie burst into laughter through her tears, nodding hard. Yes, I will. Adrian rose and wrapped her tightly in his arms, as if carving his vow into every beat of his heart. The pan slipped from Sophie's hand and clattered to the floor, but neither of them cared. Too bad, Sophie whispered against his chest. If anyone asks about the proposal, I'll have to admit it happened in a messy kitchen, right next to the pan that nearly killed you. Good, Adrian chuckled, kissing her hair. At least it's exclusive. No one else can copy it. They both laughed out loud, their laughter mingling with the drizzle tapping against the windows and the golden light glowing over the small kitchen. 1 month later, the wedding took place, a simple yet warm affair. No extravagant fireworks, just friends, colleagues, and the children they had once helped. Sophie wore a plain white dress, Adrian a classic suit. They held hands, exchanged rings, and sealed it with a long kiss to thunderous applause. And when night fell, back in the 24th floor apartment, Sophie picked up the pan again, raising it in mock threat. If you walk into the wrong door again, I'll really hit you. Adrian arched a brow, leaned in to whisper in her ear. As long as you let me hold you after every hit, I'm ready. Sophie blushed, laughing, and wrapped her arms around his neck. Outside, the city shone bright, but for them, the whole world was contained in that tiny kitchen on the 24th floor, where their story began, and where it had written its happiest ending.